pal Megtooth Sith, and what I got for you is, this is a long video. This video is some 2.5 hours long, maybe a little bit longer by the time I add all the stuff in tonight. But this is going to be a full install of this. This is not the Phoenix Props 7 Chambers IK. This is the original Starkiller Ultimate Edition. This was the one that came out before the IK, and we're going to be showing you, which is this saber. Now, of course, it's got a lot of weathering on it, and it's beaten and worn. There's 3 things I did not show in this video. Weathering this lightsaber, I did not show in this video, but I used Casey's aluminum black, and I also used a faux rust kit with iron paint, which you can get from the Hobby Lobby, and a lot of sanding with various grit sandpaper, 1500, 2000 grit to get my polish back on after the faux weathering, and that's how I got that. The other thing that I did not show in this video is the wiring or the actual gluing in the switches. So the switches I used, I'm going to hold this thing up there, hopefully you guys can see it. The switches I used are very tiny surface mounted switches, and they have a brass hat on them. And then I actually glued those switches into the control box, and you can see the brass hat sticking through the control box there. Now I barely have any detent on those switches, so there's just enough exposed where I can press the switches. And I secured those into the control box with E6000. Now you do see me soldering onto the legs of the switches, which those switch legs are very, very tiny. I'm going to hold the switch toward you all so maybe you can see how small the switch legs are compared to my fingers. Hopefully it's going to focus. The switch legs are very, very tiny. Also, I had to go back and film the wiring of some 2020 strips, and I had to edit that in because I didn't. But other than that, the full install of it is on here, and man, this saber is awesome. This saber rocks. This is a personal build. I haven't done a personal build since 2020, so this is pretty awesome for me. This is my Starkiller. I previously installed a bunch of these Phoenix Prop Starkillers, and man, I love them. I love this kit. The kit's complicated. Some of the engineering isn't the greatest, but the appearances of the kit are outstanding. And someday I do want to do a Graphics 2.0 Starkiller, but until I have time to get that project done, I have my Phoenix Prop Starkiller saber. This is going to be powered by Proffie 2.2 with an orange mask or clear mask. It's an orange looking board. It's pretty cool. And I'll show you this thing at the end of the video after we're done. So it's a long video. You've been warned. Here we go. Yeah, I figure I'm gonna film some of this. This is my prep work for the live video on solo sabers, and I've already inserted my battery. I've got my pre-wired battery already inserted in this chassis, and I've got my negative wire from my battery sticking out of the slot where the recharge port goes. And then I am wiring up my recharge port. So I've wired the white wire on the recharge port, and on these 1.3 millimeter recharge ports, this side is cut off, this is battery negative, and the one on the bottom is positive. And I test them in my, I always test them in my, my battery tester. So what I do, I've got a video about this, but what I do is I basically have made a 2.1 millimeter to 1.3 millimeter charge port adapter, and I plug this into the recharge port, and then I plug this into my charger, and then I put my voltmeter on the positive, and then I put my negative on both of these. When the charger's plugged in, whichever one of these negative pads is reading 0 volts when your charger's plugged in is the cutoff leg, and whichever one is actually reading charge voltage is your negative leg. So I know this is my cutoff leg. When you plug the charger in, this one has no negative going to it. So this is my actual battery negative leg here, which is what we're getting ready to solder our battery negative to. So that's when I brought y'all on for the ride. So I'm sorry I missed videotaping the beginning of this, but stranger things have happened. I'm going to try and keep all this in frame as much as possible, but I'm trying not to pay much attention to this camera. Let me get my goggles down here. Hopefully I'll be able to see this. I'll inspect that with my goggles here. I kind of like that. All right, so now my cutoff wire and my negative wire are on the recharge port. So the last thing I need to do is attach a positive wire here to the underside of the recharge port here on this tab, the bottom tab there. I'm going to attach my positive wire there, and then I'm going to get these wires run. So this wire, this white wire that goes to the cutoff leg on the recharge port, this is actually my negative to my Proffieboard, and the black wire attached is the negative from my battery going into this recharge port, and then the positive wire from here, I'm going to actually solder two wires on here, a 26 gauge, which is going to go to my kill switch up here, but I'm also going to solder a 22 gauge, so this is going to be a dual wire going into the recharge port, and the 22 gauge is going to run up here where I'm going to join it on my battery positive. I'm going to have a positive merge in here that's going to be inside the chassis, which is going to be battery positive, Neopixel positive, positive from recharge port, and positive from accent Neopixel that's driving the chamber in the Starkiller, and all that will be in here. Of course, then I'll have my speaker in here, bada bing bada boom. You know, life is good. So let's go ahead and solder the positive wire pair on here. So let me go get a 26 gauge and a 22 gauge, and the 22 gauge needs to be pretty long and the 26 gauge needs to be short. This is kind of, I had to do a lot of thinking about this one. So the 22 gauge needs to be pretty long. That should work. And then the 26 gauge can be kind of short because it's just going to, uh-oh, I'm out of 26 gauge red. That sucks. Well, I think I have some here. Yeah, I have to order some more 26 gauge red. But I do have some here, and that's too long, but that'll work. And let's see here. I should have another strand of 26 gauge red somewhere. I'll find that one when we finish our switch, but at any rate, let's get these two bound together. And that one piece of 26 may be long enough. So I'm gonna strip off the cut into this because that was already soldered. I was using these for routing wires on the Master Graflex. This is 26 gauge, and let's strip it quite a good ways back. There we go. And then this should be, or I had it opposite, that was 22 gauge, this should be 26 gauge. Yeah, this is 22 gauge and that's 26 gauge, regardless. You know, there we go. And I'm going to twist those two together. I'm trying to stay in frame here. And there's those two twisted. Now we're going to dip them in flux and come on in here and we don't need that advertisements, do we? Yeah, I don't think so. Okay. So I'm going to trim that down a little bit because we don't need all that wire. There's what she looks like now. So this is going to go on the bottom of my recharge port. So let me try to bring my recharge port in here. And I'm going to put these positive wires in my I need y'all focused in here. Might have to go to manual focus. Let's go to and then I get this white wire, which was blurring y'all out of frame. There we go. Now let's pretend this recharge port to receive our positive wire. Oh, shaky hands. I think I've had enough caffeine this morning. And now we're going to come in here and we're going to try and join that and put the flat side there. Get pretty clean that soldering tip. Get some fresh solder on there and try to come to town here on our positive. The wire's separated. We don't want that. Well, let's inspect it. I mean, it's okay. It's good enough. So I'm going to send this recharge port down to the hilt. So I know this white wire, let me zoom you guys back out. So I know this white wire, this is going to be the negative to our Proffieboard, so we need to go ahead and get it in here. But I think what I'm going to do first is just get all the wires into the chassis, so we can feed this recharge port down in there. This is 26 gauge, so put the 26 gauge wire. This is eventually going to go to our switch, so we actually need that 26 gauge wire to come out of our switch hole. And you can see that 26 gauge is coming out of our switch hole, because I'm switching the positive line, which just caused me a problem on Andy's Saber because it's got normal LEDs, but this isn't going to have normal LEDs on it. It's going to have just Neopixel LEDs. So there's our recharge port, and you know, I know it's going to be a tight fit down in here, and I might have to open up this. I might have to open that up a little bit to get my recharge port down in there. So I'm going to melt it away a bit. I can fix it with plastic solder. I'm going to melt that away a little bit so we can get our recharge port down in there. I'll come back in with some plastic welding and fix this once it's in. But these 2.1 millimeter recharge ports, the gap they leave you to get these in there is not really enough to get them in there when they're wired. I'm having to be creative with my soldering iron, but there. Now it's down in there. Trying to get it down in there straight. And left the kill key in that recharge port, so you know, once I got it down in there, that once I got it down in there, it wouldn't collapse the recharge port. So, all right, so now I'm gonna weld the plastic back around the recharge port, and I'll sand all this down and repaint it, but I'm gonna melt the plastic back into the recharge port here. And then I have to clean the soldering tip here, but should be pretty good there. Let me get some scrap plastic here. And plastic weld some scrap plastic back in there. And then I'll sand all this down and file it down, make it smooth, and repaint it. That's going to need to be sanded down anyway because it's a little sticking up a little bit. But I think it'll be okay. I think that'll be okay. So there's our recharge port in. Now the key is let's strip these wires. Let's test our recharge port really quick because our recharge port is actually hot. It's live, so if I pull this kill key, we should be measuring voltage here. So let me do this one last test since I've kind of got that solidified in there. This should be our 22 gauge wire here, right? Or is this our 26? That's our 26. This is our 22. Yeah, I got the wrong wire up in through there. Irregardless. All right, let's bring the multimeter in here, and black lead on our white wire, red lead on our red wire. I'll show you here in a second. Red lead on a red wire, and then we're going to pull the kill key. Keep an eye on the multimeter. Anything come disconnected? That should have given us volts. We don't have volts. All right, so I figured out the problem. The problem was I didn't have my positive wires joined in the you know, from the battery positive to my recharge port. So there's nothing wrong. My wiring test fine. I'll show you again here on a multimeter. I meant to record it a second ago and I didn't. So what I'm doing right now is I want to pull my positive wire from my recharge port to the front of the chassis where it's going to join this one. So I pushed a 22 gauge wire. This is a trick. I pushed a 22 gauge wire in through the wire channel where it comes out here at the back of the chassis. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder our wire to it. That's going to run up through the chassis, and I'm basically using that as a fish tape. For those of y'all that don't know what a fish tape is, this is me fishing wires through the chassis, and this is how I do it. So I'll solder the wire that is going to the front of our chassis to our fish tape wire. And I could have done a neater job of that. That was way too much wire. So let me clip all this excess crap that's going to get hung up on stuff inside the chassis. And there, you know, that solder is somewhat clean there. And we're going to pull that wire through the chassis with our guide wire. So this is our guide wire here. And I'm going to pull that wire through the chassis, hopefully. It's jamming up on something. Jamming up right there. You're gonna go. goes. We got it through there. So now we have our positive wire from the recharge port coming out the front of the chassis where I wanted it, where it's going to join our Neopixel positive and our accent positive, and that merge will go in here. Now, I have my white wire, which is coming off our recharge port. This is eventually going to feed our Proffieboard negative, and I need to get it into where our Proffieboard goes. So right now, I'm feeding that wire into the chassis where the Proffieboard is going to be, and I'm going to go ahead and put it underneath here and just pull it out here for storage, because I don't want it, you know, all flopping around and being a distraction. And there we go. So now my white wire that's going to be the negative for my Proffieboard is fed in there. This red wire is coming from the recharge port, and we're going to be taking it to this switch. And this switch has 3 legs. I'll explain that in a second. It has 3 legs. We're only going to be using 2 of these legs. You know, we're going to use a middle one and an outside one. And then this will be our power kill switch. So this red wire that's coming off our recharge port, which is positive, it's going to feed this kill switch, and then we're going to take the middle leg off the kill switch, and that's going to be the positive for our Proffieboard. So that's how we're going to turn on and off our Proffieboard with the positive. That's how that's going to work. And then the only other thing I have to do to get this chassis ready to rock and roll is go ahead and wire the speaker. Speaker is easy peasy Japanesey, but let's go ahead and wire this switch in. So the switch has 3 legs. The center leg is we're going to bring power in off the center leg, and whichever way we want the switch to go, like if it goes this way, there will be continuity between the center leg and this leg. That means it's on. And then when it goes this way, there's continuity between the center leg and this leg, which means it's off for this circuit. This is a way you can, you know, switch batteries and that kind of thing. But we're going to use this like a power switch, like a light switch. It's either off or on. And as a result of us using this as a power switch, we don't need this leg. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this leg, and that way the center leg is all we need. The center leg is going to connect to the wire that's coming off our recharge port. And then we're going to, you know, once we cut off this wire, we'll send the rest of that to our Proffieboard. So this will join the white wire and power supply to the Proffieboard, but it's switched here on this switch. This is just like the wiring diagrams for putting in a kill switch. I'm wiring the positive circuit. So first things first, you know, trying to leave as little cram through as possible. So I'm going to cut that wire as short as I can. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to strip that wire just a little bit. And that's 22 gauge. Or 26 gauge, I'm sorry. That is 26 gauge, because you know the switch won't be carrying the full amps of the Proffieboard. Let's go ahead and pre-tin that wire. And that wire is pre-tinned and ready to rock and roll. And then let's bring in our switch. We need to pre-tin our switch. And hoping y'all are going to be able to see this. So there's our switch, and you can see the 2 legs on it. And now we're going to pre-tin those switch legs. Let's get a little bit of fluxers on there. And we're going to pre-tin those. And clean off my iron. Wipe off the iron, put a little bit more fresh solder on my iron, and we're going to come in here. You know what? Need to grab some shrinkaroo. I didn't shrink the recharge port because the connections are separated, But this switch, I'm going to go ahead and put shrink on here because these switch legs could technically bend. And if they do, then, you know, they could touch each other and then the switch would be always on, which we don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and drop some shrinkaroo down in there. I'm putting some shrink wrap on our red wire here. And drop it on down in there. And then now I can bring down my goggles so I can see what I'm doing. And we're going to wire this switch on in here. Wire this hot wire onto this switch. Oh, come on now. Aha! Third time's a charm. So there we go. That wire is now on the switch. We're going to pull up our shrink up over that connection. And then we're going to shrinkaroo. Bada bing. You know, and there's that shrink wrap wire. Now we need to wire this piece of 26 gauge wire scrap to that. So that's what we're going to do now. So this scrap piece of 26 gauge wire that we've just cut off that long one, you know, that we initially routed up through there, we're going to stripperoo, and we're going to have to add a little piece of shrink wrap onto this, which we can do after. Right now I'm twisting and fluxing and pre-tinning this wire. Okay, now let's try and bend this. There we go. So that's going to be good for me to work with. And let me get in here with my magic vision. Oh, I should have put those in my helping hands. I don't like that solder. I know y'all aren't going to be able to see this, but it's okay. You know, I like that solder. That's much better. I'll show it to you. So there is our second solder to that other side of the positive leg. Now we're going to drop some heat shrink onto there and shrink that up. And we're almost through wiring the chassis here. Now I am going to have to repaint it where I had to solder melt there. And I'll show you all this working here in a bit. So we're going to drop our shrinkaroo onto that switch leg. We'll go ahead and, you know, go ahead and melt that sweet switch leg there. And our kill key is in. But what I'm going to do now is we're going to, so I typically like my switches to go on that way when you're holding the lightsaber. So this will be off and this will be on. So the on wire that we just put on there, we need to have going that way, whichever way our switch is going. So I'm going to put our switch wire. This is going to be our positive that feeds the Proffieboard, by the way. This wire will be the positive that feeds our Proffieboard. And now I'm going to push that switch down in through there, just like that. And bada bing, bada boom. Now, let's turn that switch off. And I'm going to drop a little bit of E6000 in our switch there to hold it in. And E6000 will allow us to be able to later, you know, remove that switch if necessary. So I'm just going to drop a little bit of E6000 in on that switch, just to hold it into the housing. bada bing. So we're solid there. Now let's go ahead and feed this wire into our chassis. So I know I need to get it in there where the Proffieboard is going to go. And we do have it turned off. And our kill key is in too. We're trying to remain as safe as we possibly can, because I am going to show you this recharge port and our battery switch working here in a second on the multimeter, which will be our final test. Now we're pretty much ready to get our our speaker wires in through there, and we're pretty much done pre-wiring the chassis. She's pretty solid, so then I can do the touch-up paint and some sanding and filing around that recharge port to make sure she's all nice and smooth, and then we'll repaint all that. But what I wanted to show y'all is that these red and white wires will work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn our switch on, but I'm going to leave the kill key in. And remember, I have to tie our two red wires at the front together, because eventually these are going to be in a merge in the very front of the chassis with our Neopixel positive and our Neopixel accent. But that merge is necessary to power our battery into the recharge port. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring in our multimeter, and we are going to connect our red to our positive wire that's going to feed the Proffieboard. So this is our positive wire that we just ran out of the switch, which is going to feed our Proffieboard. And then we are going to connect our white to our black to our white wire, which is our negative, coming out of the recharge port. Now we're going to pull the kill key out of the recharge port. We should have full voltage, 4.1 volts, and we do. Now I'm going to turn the kill key off, and we should lose voltage. I'm going to turn this kill switch off we just installed. No volts. I'm going to turn that switch on, 4.1 volts. So that's a final check of everything. The recharge port and the switch are wired correctly. I'm going to pull those positives apart for right now, because I don't want this board electrified at this moment. And we'll go ahead and reinsert the kill key. And I'll finish up this chassis later, but right now let's go ahead and wire the speaker and get the speaker in through here, and we'll be rocking and rolling. Pretty good stuff. All right, so I am going to be soldering up a Smuggler's Outpost Elite speaker here. This is a 28mm bass speaker from Smuggler's Outpost. They're pretty awesome. And I'm using 30 gauge PTFE wire here to solder this sucker in, and we're going to use our same wire rounding method to get these wires in as we got the other wires into the chassis, because it's going to be it's going to be tight quarters getting these speaker wires in, but using PTFE is advantage number one, and advantage number two is there it goes. That solder on these speakers takes a little bit longer to solidify, and I use my hex key because it helps hold the the magnet on the speaker. It actually holds the speaker there while I'm soldering it. And I am going to use hot glue on the back of the speaker. It's one of the only places I use hot glue in my builds, just because you don't see it, and it actually helps keep you from pulling the wires out of the speaker. And on this build, we actually have to put the speaker in last, because you have to be able to get the pins in on the chassis. The actual brass rods in the chassis have to go in through the speaker in the back, because the chassis is already inserted in the Saber, and you can't insert them from the front. So you have to, you can't put those rods in until after you install the Proffieboard, because they're just they go right over the Proffieboard. So kind of the only engineering defect on this chassis is that aspect of it, that you can't. Normally I use blue for my speakers, but for whatever reason I'm out of blue. But I'm gonna you know, I'm going to hold those wires down. Hopefully those wires should be long enough. And, you know, these are the last wires we're going to have to route up through the chassis. And we're going to route these wires through the chassis, you know, and they'll come out here on this side, which is what we want. So we're going to wire them through this side. There's a reason that I ran all these other wires through that side of the chassis, because, you know, these wires are on this side of the Proffieboard and our speaker wires are on this side of the Proffieboard. I've zoomed in. Out. No, I didn't want to. There's a reason that we ran the wires the way we did. So these power wires, you know, we ran the red and white wire here on this side, because when the Proffieboard goes in here, these red and white wires are actually going to be on this side of the Proffieboard. And then the speaker wires, we're going to run down through this routing hole on this side. So our speaker wires will come out here, which is good because the speaker wires are on this side of the Proffieboard. So, you know, we're using these very small wire routes in this Goth chassis to, you know, to make it happen. When I was talking about we have to, you can see the two holes there that our chassis rods go through. And I have to, because this is inserted in the Saber, so normally, you know, you put the chassis rods in the front. But the way I'm building this Saber, this is already going to be inserted into the lightsaber like so. And, you know, we're going to have to insert the chassis rods after we install the Proffieboard, because they actually go over the Proffieboard, and then we'll be able to finalize our speaker. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the speaker in now temporarily, but I'm not going to glue it in. We're going to go ahead and route these wires and get it in there. But we need to be able to flop our speaker out so we can put in those chassis rods. And the chassis rods are what our, you know, our door clips onto to actually close up the chassis. So, you know, those chassis rods are important, but they're also very close to the Proffieboard. We're also going to have to insulate the Proffieboard after we install it from those chassis rods, so we don't get any shorts. That would be a bad day. But, you know, you can see that our chassis preparation is almost done. All right, so back to the speaker here. Like I said, this is the only place where I use hot goo. And I'm going to drop some hot goo on those speaker wires right there. And the reason I do this, especially in this build, because of the way that this build works, now I'm going to unplug that because we won't need it again on the build. The reason that I do that on these wires is because, and hot goo makes such a freaking mess, man. The reason I do that on these wires is that, you know, we're going to be taking the speaker in and out, in and out, in and out of the chassis, and I don't want us to pull the wires out while we're, you know, working on the chassis. So that's why I do the hot goo. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to twist these wires. Why are we zoomed in again? Now I'm going to twist these wires. I don't even know if the hot goo thing turned out. I'm going to twist the wires so we can route them into the chassis. And there's our speaker wires twisted, you know. And you're not afraid to hold up the speaker by the wires because the hot goo is holding, you know, the speaker on there, which is pretty awesome. Now I'm going to take a routing wire, which I'm going to use 22 gauge for the routing wire. So I'm going to get this 22 gauge wire out here. And we know we want our speaker wires routing through this side. So I'm going to push this routing wire through there. Maybe. Yep. And yeah, I'll get it up through there. It's just being difficult. This is the end I need to pull from, so I'm going to have to be able to pull that out of there. Oh, there you go. So I got the wire out of there. And now I'm going to grab onto that wire with my forceps and lock in my forceps. I'm going to pull my push tool out of there. So this is going to be our snake wire that I'm going to snake the speakers in there with. So we're going to go ahead and strip our snake wire. This is 22 gauge. 22 gauge works good for snaking because it's, you know, pretty tough stuff. Now this is a temporary solder, so that's why I'm not putting, you know, shrink over it, because it's not even a, this isn't part of a circuit. So there we go there. And now we need to strip some speaker wires, which are 30. And we're going to strip speaker wires and twist them together, and then we'll solder them to that, and then we'll use this 22 gauge wire to pull our speaker wires up through there. A solder snake. You know, sometimes it's kind of hard pushing wires in through these chassis, especially these skinny wires like 30, like I use for speakers. So sometimes it's a lot easier just to use a snake, use a 22 gauge wire as a snake, and then, you know, solder them up. So I've twisted my two speaker wires together. Now this is temporary, so don't everybody freak out, because this isn't, you know, me wiring these things. I'm just using the solder to snake my speaker wires where I want them in the chassis. So there's my solder snake on, and now we're going to pull our wires into the chassis where we want them. And there they are. They're right where we want them. And then we can, you know, temporarily set our speaker in there. And, you know, our speaker wires are now in our chassis, precisely where we want them. I'm going to go ahead and get them out of the way. I'm going to put them in here like we did the other wires, just to hold them out of the way. And there we go. Now, our speaker wires are in there. We can still pull our speaker out to get our chassis rods in, and, you know, we're solid there. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that with a soldering iron, so, you know, our snake thing is done. We don't need that anymore. And basically, you know, our chassis pre-wire is complete. The only thing really remaining that we need to get done now is, you know, I need to smooth out where I had to plastic weld around this recharge port. And I probably need to repaint, and you know, the chassis where I handled it there. So I'm going to repaint that chassis so it has time to dry before I install in a few nights. But there it is. That was the chassis prep for the Starkiller Lightsaber. Chassis prep complete. Now we're actually going to move on to Saber prep. So on the Saber, what I have to do is I have to prep the stock adapter, which is down in there. I have to prep the Neopixel that's going to illuminate our chamber. And so we're going to have, I think we're just going to run the stock adapter in parallel, because I have a plan for something. And the stock adapter is going to run in parallel with the blade, main blade. This is going to be, the crystal will be independent. And, you know, so there's only going to be 3 wires coming out of the stock adapter, 3 wires on the pixel here. And, you know, we'll have those 6 wires coming out to go into that chassis. 2 of those 6 wires are red, which we'll be combining on the 2 red wires that are already in our chassis. So that's what's happening next. Okay, so I'm wearing this in V2, so blade in parallel with the onboard LEDs. This is a stock V3 connector with, you know, the 16 Neopixels on it. And basically I'm going to leave my onboard 0603 resistors both there, because I'm reading the instruction manual, and my data for the blade and the onboard LEDs goes here. You know, my positive can go to any positive pad, and negative can go to any negative pad. So we're going to go ahead and solder this thing up. So let's, butter up. Hang on a minute. I got a better butterer than that. Let's get some solder on the subject here. So we'll have to pre-tin that pad. And then negative we'll go ahead and run there. So let's pre-tin our pads. I can find the end of the solder. Trying to get y'all where you're not in my way, but where you can see what we're doing. Alright. Hopefully that's not in my way. Looks like I can see what I'm doing here. There is that pad pre-tinned. Now let's pre-tin our positive pad. Alright. Now positive, I'm using 26 gauge. So we're going to go ahead and strip a very small piece of 22 gauge to feed the positive. I'm only going to strip a very tiny little bit in, just enough to get to the pad. That's a big, huge mistake that most people make, is stripping too much wire or using, silicone jacketed wire and melting it back. There we go. All right, so you can see I don't have much wire stripped there. And I'm going to come in here and I'm trying to get it so it's to the outside. Bada bing, just like that. Now I'm going to bring our data wire in here, and our data is 30, a lot thinner. 30. I sure hope these are going to be long enough, because this is going to be in there. Should be long enough. Yeah, I think it will be. Even after all the routing, I think these are going to be long enough. Alright, we're going to trying to get y'all back in focus over here. I probably have too much wire stripped there, so I'm going to cut a little bit of that off. And probably going to use my hemostats here, because these small wires are hard for me to hang on to, where the hemostats are a lot easier. Try and move this to the direction I'm more comfortable with. Let's try to get some of the wire out of the way. Well, y'all can see in there. Looks like y'all can. I'm happy with that. So there's our data wire on, and now one last wire remains, which is our negative, which is 22 gauge. Now this wire is definitely carrying the full amp load of the blade. DC circuit, power flow, some negative to positive, kind of. I know a bunch of this is theoretical, but flows from negative to positive, so the bulk of the amps are going to be carried on the negative line on this Neopixel. This is the negative power supply to our Neopixel adapter. And I'm going to hold on to this with my forceps and try to keep the other wire out of the way. So all I'm dealing with is what we're dealing with. And try to move all this and make sure you guys are in frame. And we're going to try and come in here for the kill right there. It's really, really hot. I'm having to hold my fingers so close to there. Okay. So now we're on there. Should be blades and everything in parallel. So that is our, PCB all wired up. We have data going to data 2. We've kept both of our onboard resistors, positive to positive, negative to negative. And now what we want to do is to test this thing. So I'm going to use my test rig. I'm going to go ahead and strip these wires and solder them onto a cord. We'll test this in our test rig before we rock and roll. And then we'll get these into a chassis. So let me zoom you guys out and bring in a test plug here. And let's see here. Leave my positive wire out of it, helping hands, and we'll put those two wires into the helping hands. I got all our wires stripped. So I just need to dip, dip, and dip. And then we'll be able to solder onto this battery for the test rig. For those of y'all that don't watch my channel, I actually have a test rig built with a Prism 5.1 that I use for testing all my Neopixel connectors and making sure that everything's working good, especially on these more complex ones like the stock. And to say it's more complex, I mean, it's got onboard LEDs, but on this Starkiller hilt, because how everything is solidified in the hilt, you definitely want to make sure that she's right before she goes in, because disassembling the entire hilt is not an option. At that point you're at a full reinstall. So to me, it always makes sense to test these things. So here's my test rig, Prism 5.1. I know it's loose off there right now. I did some work on there, but trust me, it'll work just the same. So now what we're going to do is, we're all connected in. We have all our wires connected in to our test plug, and I have this male test plug which I've soldered to our connector, and I have this female test plug which is on my test rig, and I get these from Neopixels when I'm building blades. That's where I get these plugs from, and making sure that the wires are separate because I don't have shrink on them. And let's test this thing. So let's boot the Prism. We've got a good boot sound. Now let's fire this thing up. Onboard LEDs work. Let's test a couple different colors. Should be blue. Lock up. Here's green. So we know red, green, and blue all work, which is all our colors, so all the other colors should work. So that's a fairly successful test of that. Now the only thing that I think I want to do in addition is I really should test this on a blade. I got to figure out a way to do this. I want to test this on a blade. have it kind of temporarily down in there where it's going to be, right? And now I should be able to test my test blades. So we're going to wire these back onto a plug, and we should be able to wire these to a test blade and rock and roll. 97X, bam, the future of rock and roll. Temporary tack. Blue is negative. Temporary tack. Purple is data. Temporary tack. We want to make sure data and negative are separate. We're going to bring in our test blade here. And bring in our test rig. Fire. Bam. Yeah. So we know our onboard pixels work as well as our blade. And, you know, you should see the onboard pixels working in there. That's awesome. Lock up. Very good. End of testing for the Neopixel adapter. Now let's wire some switches. Alright, our switches. Now I've used micro brass top switches for this thing. And we're going to make, you know, the forward one our main switch and the rear one our auxiliary. We do have tactile action there. It's very minor, but that's all you need. And, you know, the hard part's going to be soldering those wires in there. Now's where the magnifiers come in handy. So I'm not going to zoom you guys in because I need to be zoomed in. And I don't know how much of this you're going to be able to see, but we're going to do the green wire here first. And I might try to find some other. Using 30 gauge here on the switches. I use green for my main. I use white for common ground to both. And I use yellow for auxiliary. How I wire my Proffies is using common ground to both switches. Which, if you've watched my channel and you've watched my installs, you know how that works. Alright. Man, that's some small stuff, because these switches are really designed to be SMD mounted. They're not really designed for this. Now what I'm going to do is I'll show you. I'm going to strip some of this 30, not a whole lot, but I'm going to need enough to combine with a jumper. And let me find some scrap wire over here. I keep a bunch of scrap wire, and I'm going to use this gray wire as a jumper. I keep a bunch of scrap wire that I can use in places like this. Now the white wire will eventually be our common ground to both switches, and you'll see what I'm talking about with a jumper here in a second. This gray wire I'm going to use as the jumper to my main switch from the auxiliary switch, because the white wire is actually going to be connected to our auxiliary switch. But I'm going to combine the white wire and gray wire, and I'm going to take the gray wire up to our power switch. So the gray wire will be a jumper. It will be very short. So twisting these together. And I'm not going to need that much wire, but I just strip a lot of wire initially so I can twist them together, because, you know, you can't twist together micro pieces of wire. And I'm going to solder them together like that. Then I'm going to cut them down to just what I need, and then I'll have to be going under the goggles to, you know, solder to this ground loop thing, which is going to be about impossible because it's small stuff, y'all. Let me get my solder in there and try to pretend that loop. I know y'all might not be able to see this. Because it's very, very tiny. So I'm going to put my white wire and gray wire on that loop. Alright. Now, I need enough of my gray wire to get up to the main switch. To be our jumper. This is our ground jumper to the main switch. So I'm going to cut her about yay long. And I'm going to strip just a little bit off of here. Just enough to get to the pad. And bring in some Fluxaroonie. And pretend. And I need to pretend it's very, very tiny. Very, very tiny stuff here, these switches. But I'm trying to leave myself as much room as I can to route these wires. Y'all may not be able to see because I got to get my big head in here. And I think we're connected there. We'll test. Very, very small stuff, y'all. Very tiny switches. These are designed to be SMD, hot air station switches. They're very tiny. And the soldering pads on them are really, really tiny. So I definitely need old man vision to get in there. I'll tell you what, without this headset, I don't know that I'd have been able to solder these switches like this. So this headset's, taking me back to my youth. Alright, so now we're going for our auxiliary switch. So we get in here and I'm going to have to pretend our auxiliary switch. I know y'all may not be able to see this. I'll show you when I'm done. You get in there and drop some. Oh, hit the. Okay, now try to get in there and attach our yellow wire. Good Lord, man, that's tight. So that should be, our switch wires all wired up. And that's tight, man. So I'm going to go ahead and twist our switch wires together. And then, we'll do testing here in a second. And then we should be able to route all this into the Saber, and then I can work on our crystal chamber Neopixel accent and our Neopixel strip accents that are going to go on top of the soundboard. and then we should be ready for the install. Mine, I'm going to write one config file, maybe write two, for the board. Alright, so there's our switch wires. Now what we're going to do is we're going to strip, and we're going to be testing for continuity, making sure that our switch function works, that makes sure that, you know, we don't have any bridges, and that the common ground of both switches is working, and that both the switches are functioning, because I glued them in with E6000. And I'm probably going to put some additional E6000 on these to solidify while we're working all this. And I need my multimeter again. And we're going to bring the multimeter in, and we're going to put it on continuity mode. And continuity mode, it's audible continuity mode, so when you touch the probes together, it makes, you know, a beep. And what's going to happen is I'm going to take my green wire, which is my main switch, and we're going to connect one probe to it, and then these small 30 gauge wires, man, I'm telling you. We're going to connect the white wire to the other probe, and then we're going to turn this over, and we're going to depress our switch. Alright, that works there. Now, let's test our auxiliary switch. So I'm going to move the red probe from the green wire to the yellow wire, which this is our auxiliary switch. And we have function there. So our switches are good to go. That wire is ready to rock. Those wires are ready to rock and roll into the hilt. I don't know what happened there. My video shut off for some reason. But, you know, this is the hard part of the Phoenix Props hilts, is, you know, routing the wires. And they have to route up through this switch piece at the top, so they don't go through the chamber. You know, they stay hidden. But, you know, it's just not an easy passage. And then this chamber's got to, of course, slide back more. And I guess I need to go ahead and solidify the chamber. I got to get that piece in there and screw that piece in. And you know, these other wires are just going to be tough. They're going to be a bear. We got to get this chamber piece in. And there's our piece for the chamber. And we need to screw in there. Right here. Yep. There's the piece we need to screw in that's going to hold in the chamber. Oh, this is just such a pain. You know, once you get this in here, it's not too bad, but getting this stuff in here is an epic pain. And trying to get all those lined up so I can get that down in there, threading into the copper. Still not wanting to thread. There she goes. So now that's threaded in. You know, our crystal chamber is in. And, you know, there's our rods. Pretty cool. And, you know, now we're ready to route these wires in through our... So you know what we're going to do? We're going to do what I did before. We're going to find us a big thick wire, 22 gauge wire. We're going to go through our crystal chamber, and you see it right there. It's going through our crystal chamber piece that we had to cut down. And now we got to try and push this into there. Just like that. Okay, so now we have a snake, right? Now what we need to do is unify all these wires. We need to solder them together so we can use this snake. So let's try and strip these down a little bit more, and we'll twist these all together and we'll snake them in. I'm wondering if we ought to snake put our switch wires on this snake too. So we can go ahead and get our switch wires all in. Let me get these wires together first, and then we'll put the 3 switch wires together, and then we'll put the switch wires onto here. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to twist our Neopixel wires all together temporarily. Just like that. And then we are going to quick solder them in place. So they're all soldered together. And we're going to cut that. Now, switch wires. I'm going to do the same thing here. Let's get all of our switch wires together. We have to do some stripping here. We're going to put all our switch wires together, and we're going to try to snake all these wires at the same time through that passage with our snake wire, just like we did in the chassis. Remember, me soldering these together right now is just temporary. Temporary, just to get them snaked through. Now I wonder, do I dare try putting these all together and combining them onto our snake wire? Sure. But I do have to strip the snake wire so we can solder it, right? I guess I'm going to try boy, I'm going to need the helping hands on this, because these really need to be, that's a lot of wires. There. Now, let's get some solder on my soldering iron, quite a bit of it, and let's try to grab this bundle. Okay, so remember, I'm not wiring anything here, I'm soldering it to my snake. This is my snake to snake all these wires to where I want them. But I'm going to gently feed them down through there, and now we're going to try and snake them all through, and there they are. So we've got all of our wires, Neopixel data positive, and our switch wires all through there. We'll pull the switch wires in through, green up front, and we're going to be ready to screw that home. Alright, so now I need an Allen tool. And the specific Allen tool I need is right there. Sorry. And we're going to try and screw these home with all the stuff in there without pinching wires. You know, certainly the Corbanth was a lot easier, the wire route and the wire passages on the Corbanth. This Phoenix Props one was just not well thought out for wire passages, because of the order of operations issue with these, you know, with how the switch assembly attaches on there. You know, it's about impossible. And you can see, you know, now I'm going to have to push out our crystal. I have to push out the crystal because I need it out of the way when we go to glue in the, or to put in the second screw. That was my order of operations mess. I forgot to leave the crystal and that rod out of there so we can get all this stuff put together. Alright, I shortened these screws. I forgot to turn y'all back on, but basically I shortened these screws and that hold the control box on because they were tightening before it was tight, so they were bottoming out inside the control box. And now the control box is actually tight. It's not wiggling around. Again, you know, every time you're building a lightsaber, you got little crap you got to deal with. So there you go. Now, we got to get our crystal back in there. And I think I want it oriented like that. So there is all that back together. We got our crystal in there. Our wires are routed. Now I may take some black paint and paint those wires black so you don't see them there, because you can see the wires in there. And we're ready for our accent pixel that's going to go here. And once we get our accent pixel wired, we can do our positive merges and everything's going to be rock and rolling. So right now we probably ought to test our switches and at least the Neopixel stuff and make sure it all works. So I'm going to take our wires apart and let's see if we can test everything. We are solid. Final test of all those wires, rock solid there. Now we just got to do the pixel that lights up the crystal chamber, and then we're pretty much done. So the pixel that lights up the chamber. We do have some touch-ups to do here on the control box with the rust. I'll do that. And we got to put that piece on. In its final location, which that actually holds the PCB on. Bada bang. So our saber head is assembled, our wires are there. The only thing we need is our Neopixel accent that's going to light up the Neopixel there. So we need to wire up a Neopixel here. There's only two things left to do in my prep work today, which is wire this Neopixel accent, which I think I'm going to use 3535 accent if I can find one. And then we're also going to wire 3030 and I'm sorry, some 2020 Neopixels to go over the soundboard. But right now we need 30 gauge red. That's going to be long enough to get back to the soundboard. It doesn't actually have to be very long because it's just going to go to the merge. 30 gauge red. Now data, I do not want to be purple because our data is already purple. So let's go, I'm going to go black for our Neopixel negative, which needs to be long because it's going back to our soundboard. And I'm going to use gray for data here. Gray for the data on this Neopixel. Alrighty. And let's see here. Here's our Neopixel. I haven't cut it yet. And pre-tin this wire, snip it a little bit because that's a little bit too much exposed wire. And then we'll solder this one onto a plug and make sure she's good. Well. Might be about time for a new soldering tip. Can't keep solder on the end of that tip, so I don't like that. I like them when they can hold solder on the end of the tip. So there's going to be time for a new soldering tip here soon. That's too long. That wire is way too long. We'll cut just what we need there. Keep hitting my old people vision on the camera because it's kind of in the way. I would like to adjust it further back, but you know, we're almost done. Actually, you know what? I said I was through with hot glue, but I'm actually going to hot glue this pixel in there. Into the saber head, because that's pretty easy. I don't want to use E6000 because I don't have enough time for E6000 to set up, because we're going to be doing this live stream here to build these sabers. So my shaky hands. Bloop, I like that. Okay, so now what we're going to do, I wasn't done with my test rig quite yet. We're going to bring all these wires together and let's do some stripperoo here so we can test this pixel. Using 30 gauge for everything on this. Single pixel, I mean this crystal chamber is only going to have a single pixel lighting it up. You know, 30 gauge is fine. It's not drawing that many amps at all. 30 gauge. 30 gauge works. Okay. Pretend. Data on this plug is green. And the negative. Blue. Test rig. Let's plug in our test rig. And while I'm plugging in my test rig and booting it, let's go ahead and plug in the hot goo gun. Because if this pixel's good, we're going to go ahead and prepare her to set in. So there's the pixel we just wired up. Oh, I don't like that. It's acting weird. Oh, it's acting weird because our line came off. Dang it. Temporary tax. I was like, oh crap, that pixel's acting weird. Yes, it was. Alright, let's try it again. Oh, look at that. Much better. Check all the colors. Blue. Green. Okay, so now, you know, we've tested this pixel. We need to unplug it because we don't want power to it, and we're getting ready to do this. We're going to go ahead and cut this down to 1 pixel, which is all we need for the crystal chamber. Bada bing. Let's plug her back in. You don't want to cut them when they're plugged in because you're going to short that pixel out. And that's going to be no good. So, you know, if you're using these cutoff pixels like I do, just make sure that they're not plugged in or powered up when you cut them. Let's test. blue. Lock up. Much success. All right, now we can desolder the wires from, actually, you know what? I'm going to leave those soldered on so we can make sure that it works once we get it in the hilt. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come insulate. Damn it. I'm going to insulate this a little bit to make sure that it doesn't contact metal. We're about ready to go into the hilt here. So you know this is going to go down into the saber head there. And I want to try and twist these wires together as good as I can. We'll have to redo that one solder, but now I'm going to put the Neopixel so it's lighting up this chamber. Okay, so I got the single Neopixel down in there to light the chamber, and now we're kind of trying to get our test rig back together here so we can test the chamber lighting up, make sure that it works, make sure that nothing's shorting out. So our test rig is on. Let's turn off the lights. Let's go ahead and plug in. And let's see if we've got light. Green. Red. Commando success. Very happy. That's the end of that. So we now have our chassis that we prepped earlier, and you know our chassis is ready to rock and roll. And you know our speaker wires are there. Our positive and negative for Profi are here, and our switch and recharge port are all wired in. We do have these two positive wires here, which we must merge onto the two positive wires, the two red wires, the little red wire coming out of our accent Neopixel, as well as the positive Neopixel. So these two red wires must be hooked together and also soldered to the two red wires on our chassis, and that's where our positive merge is going to be. It's going to be inside of our chassis, inside of here. then we'll have to feed all our wires into the chassis. So what we're going to do now is I think we're going to tape these wires out of the way as we close in on the final stages of install prep. The only thing left after all this is going to be soldering in the soundboard, which, you know, I guess we're going to do on the live stream. But for those of y'all that wanted to see the rest of the install, I figured I'd catch it here for y'all. So we need to get our switch wires, Neopixel negative and data. Neopixel negative and data. All those wires need to get out of the way. So we're going to go ahead and tape them out of the way. That way they're not bothering us. And I want to do as little cram foo as possible, but we still need, you know, we're still going to have to do some cram foo of shoving these wires in, but strip them just short enough where I can strip them fairly easily and twist them and tie them into these other two. And let's go, that's actually 22 gauge there. And so now we need to tie this 30 and the 22 gauge together. My needle nose pliers have teeth on them that kind of help twist. The 22 gauge wires kind of don't like, they don't like taking on a twist as much as, or the 22 gauge pliers don't like accepting the 30 gauge. They don't like pairing with them. All right, so there's our positive wire ready for the merge in the hilt. Now we need the positive wires ready for the merge here. So I'm going to do the same thing. You know, I don't want to cut them too close inside of the chassis because I want to be able to strip them. And these are both 22 gauge. I'm going to get those 22 gauge wires out of the way. And we're going to have to remember to put shrink wrap on before we tie these, and we'll make sure it's enough shrink to cover the joint. All right, so there now our 22 really doesn't like twisting with anything. So that's what I do. I flatten it out with the needle nose and then braid them together, and just like that. Dip her in the flux, bring in the solder, and muy excelente. Now we need a piece of shrink, and lo and behold, I got a piece of shrink right here. Make it long enough to cover the whole joint. I'm going to slide it on. Use the helping hands here. Hold that wire, and I'm going to get my forceps to hold this wire. And we're going to join forces here. That looks like to be a bit much of wire there. And same here, we're going to cut a little bit off. Now, we're going to come on up here and we're going to join forces. I'm going to clean my soldering iron, put some fresh solder on there, and we're going to join forces. Wonder Twin powers activate. And there is our merge. And I'm going to slide the shrink up over our merge, maybe. Just like that. Get the helping hands out of the way so you guys can see. I'm going to shrink, shrink, shrinkaroo here, our merge. And yes, that merge is going to have to be cram food in there, but it should be just fine. That is our positive merge, and that is it. Now we're ready to start taking wires into the chassis. Because the only thing left now is the install of the Proffieboard. Once we get all this done, we got to get these wires into the chassis. Let's see if we can do this without a snake. I think we can. There's our switch wires. Now we need our main Neopixel negative. Our main Neopixel negative. Now here's our accent. This is our crystal chamber Neopixel negative. And it's kind of a mess here. I want that to go underneath all there. I'm trying to keep all the wires from being tangled up in there. Oh, they were in there. There they are. And lastly is our main Neopixel data. I see it. It just doesn't want to. Ho, 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 ho. Alright. Now, I'm not going to put a whole lot of E6000 because I do have a set screw, but a little bit of E6000 on there to hold this chassis in. And let's go ahead and drive this sucker home. I'm going to have to loosen this set screw here because that's my chassis set screw. Stand by, I'll show you when I... Oh yeah. So that was my chassis set screw there. And I'm bringing the chassis on home. And I want that chassis oriented like that. And let's go ahead and tighten this chassis set screw. We do have some E6000 on there. But this chassis set screw should hold it tight. And there we go. We're ready to rock and roll. So there is our, lightsaber ready to install. And I suppose I need to take a picture of this and put on the old website to let them know I'm ready to install. We're ready to rock and roll. Stand by. This one's getting this clear mask Proffieboard. I've been holding this for a special saber. This is going into mine. There you can see the clear mask Proffieboard, and you can see all our wires ready to install. Main board positive, main board negative. The green, yellow, and white are switch, common ground. Big black wires are main Neopixel negative. This purple wire is our Neopixel data to the main blade. And this gray and black wire here are the Neopixel data and negative to our pixel that's lighting up the crystal chamber. So we're all ready to wire. The only thing I have remaining to do is I'm going to wire a piece of 2020 pixel that's going to go over our soundboard. And I may save that for the actual live day of install. And, ready to rock and roll. I'm going to quick take a picture for let them know I'm ready, and off we go. All right, here comes some brutal honesty. I forgot to film the 2020 wiring, so I'm going to show you guys really quick wiring up these 2020s. And I've explained some of this in my live videos, and a lot of people don't even know what 2020 strips are. Well, these are 50/50s, and kind of gives you an idea of these are the original Neopixel strips that we built most of our blades out of. And you can see that the the 50 by 50 millimeter Neopixel in the center of the strip. You can see those are kind of big. And then you have the 3535s, or the like the Adafruit skinny strips. And these are the Adafruit skinny strips here. And these are the 3535 Neopixels. And then these are the 2020s. The reason the 2020s are so cool is that, you know, you can fit a lot. It's the Neopixel density. Look, you know, for every 2 Neopixels, you get 4 on the 2020 strips. So the animations are really dense, and the special effects are really dense in a very tightly packed area. And these strips are so skinny, you can actually fit, you know, a lot of them in a very small area. And I've already looked at it, and I can fit 2 of these strips together side by side over the soundboard, underneath the soundboard cover in the chassis for the Starkiller lightsaber. All right, so one of the first things we got to do on the 2020s is, number one, you know, the arrows. I'm hoping you guys can see the arrows on there, but the arrows are actually going, you know, to this way, to the right, they're going that way, they're pointing that way. So you know that we have to wire our wires here at the bottom of the strip, you know, where the arrows are not, where the arrows are emanating from. So our wires are going to have to go down here. How you know how to cut these 2020 strips, at least these particular kinds that I've been buying, is that there's a cut line every 5 pixels. And that's where I cut mine. And the cool part about cutting every 5 pixels is that you'll also get, you know, your wiring pads every 5 pixels. So you can see underneath here, now that I've taken the tape adhesive backing off, you can see we have, you know, wiring pads every 5 pixels. And when you cut on that cut line, you're actually cutting these long pads in half. So you'd be cutting those long pads in half. So you can see I got half pads here where I'm going to start. So that's where I'm going to wire to. Now these are very small. You know, you can see those pads I'm going to wire to in comparison to my thumb. It's kind of small. So I have to bring the old people vision in here, and we're going to wire these wires. But the first thing we got to do is we got to get this adhesive off the back. You cannot solder through this adhesive. You've got to get the adhesive off there, and I typically use a knife. This knife isn't very sharp. I need some new X-Acto knives. Next time I go to the hobby store, I'm going to buy some X-Acto knives because I really need some new ones. But at any rate, here's a newer knife, and I'm just trying to get underneath that adhesive because we need to get that adhesive going. I got it. Of course, I was off camera when I did it, but you know, you get the point. You got to get that sticky stuff off your strips because that's just no good. So when I look at the strips again, arrows are pointing this way on these strips. So this is my origin pads here, and I'm going to go ahead and put those into my clamp, and hopefully it'll zoom in on them. Take the other stuff out of the picture, so hopefully it'll zoom in on it in the center. There we go. That's what we want to see happen, just like that. Now those pads are really small, you know. I mean, I'm going to have to get my x-ray vision going here, but I'm going to butter up those with a little bit of flux, and let's pre-tin them. I got my iron ready to go here. We're just going to butter these up with a little bit of flux. And clean my iron here. And here we go. And I'm going to check those because it looks like I might have a bridge. I'm going to go under my x-ray vision here. Yeah, I got a bridge. I got a bridge between negative and data. So I'm just going to flick a little bit on there. And I think I got rid of that bridge on negative and data. So now I'm going to start coming in with my wires. I'm going to do data first because data's in the center. And you know, even though I use a very, very sharp soldering iron, it's still very difficult to get to data without touching the other pads. But you can get to positive and negative without touching the data pads coming in from the outside. So I'm probably going to hit the positive or negative pad while I'm soldering on data, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All right. So I pre-tinned my data. Now I'm going to trim. I just want a very, very little bit on this, and you will see. I'm going to try and keep you guys in here. I might have to lower it a little bit. Work is bothering me. And hopefully you guys have this in frame. I really need that lower, but if I do, you guys aren't going to be able to see it. Let me put it in some hemostats. And try to get it a little bit lower. Try not to put my hand over it. Where there we go. I was able to microscopically watch that solder melt and put that data wire on the pad. That data wire is the hardest one to get. These pads are really, really small. I mean, I showed you how small they were in relation to my thumb. Oops, kind of got out of focus because there we go. Now I'm pre-tinning my positive wire, stripping and pre-tinning, and we're going to bring in the positive wire in there, and then we're going to put these on a Neopixel tester and test them. So here comes my positive wire, y'all. That's too long. Let me cut just a hair off of that positive wire. You know, I just want it to barely cover the pad. Yeah. All right. There we go. Add a little bit more solder on that negative pad. I don't even see. What happened there? Alright, there's some solder on that negative pad there now. And now I'm basically going to be pre-tinning my negative wire to come in here. This is a lot easier when I'm not under camera, because you know, when I'm not under camera I can just get my face right over this thing and hold it low and steady my hands with the ground. But I've got this thing up near the camera, so hopefully you guys can see what's going on, but then you guys get to see my shaky hands. There we go. So we got all three of our wires on. Now I'm going to zoom you guys way out and lower this down, because I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here next. I'm going to be getting my test rig. I'm going to need a battery for my test rig, and I'm going to need a Neopixel plug. And you guys have been seeing me do this the whole video. You know, I'm a test freak. So this is a male Neopixel plug that you get off Neopixel strips when you buy them. And I have my test rig to a female plug. So all I got to do is plug into any Neopixel strip and I can test it with my test rig. These two purple wires sticking out there are so I can test speakers. I need to glue this damn prism back down. Don't know why I let it come unglued. I know I had to do a repair on it, but these are for testing speakers with the test rig. But you know, mostly I test Neopixels. So let me get a battery for this test rig. I'm going to pop a battery into it. There we go on the boot, so we know we're good there. Now, I've got to strip these. I've got to strip all our wires on our Neopixel. There is our data, and the black is our negative, and I had to use orange for positive because I'm out of red 30. Which, you know, these are the same color wires I used on the actual Neopixels in the video, and I'll explain to you what you're getting ready to see in the video when I break these things out, because I kind of broke them out as a surprise in the end of my video, because I didn't want people necessarily to know everything I had in plan, and you know, wanted to make this look pretty cool. So let me pre-tin these, get some solder on my soldering iron. Blam blam, solder's happening here. All right, so now I got my data, which data is green on this plug because the green's in the center. So bam, there's a tack on data. Red is positive, so bam, there's my tack on positive, and of course my white is my negative. Alright, so now we have our Neopixels on a plug, and I want to try and get the Neopixels here where you can see them. I'm going to make sure I've got all that separated, and you can see that Neopixel strip right here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my test rig out, and we're going to go ahead and plug in my test rig right here. And let's go ahead and boot up the test rig, or it might actually fire up the Saber. Might actually fire up this strip. So it did fire up the strip, so that's pretty cool. That's a standard blue. That's pretty cool. Let me turn these lights off so you guys can see that. It's crazy. These 2020s are bright, man. They're sick. All right, green. And lock up. Alright, so that's a pretty good test of those 2020s. Lights back on. Let's unplug from the 2020 strip, and I'm going to detack all those wires. So basically, what I did in the video is I did this 2 times with 15 in a strip, because that's what fit in that space, and eventually I had to cut them down to 13, so I had to cut these last 2 pixels off. So it was just 13, so it's 26 in total. And basically what I did is, once I wired these 2 strips just like this, is I combined the common color wires into single black, single gray, and single orange. So both the strips run in parallel. And then I turned them over, and they were next to each other, and I put packing tape on the back to insulate the strips from the soundboard and everything else, and to hold the strips together. And those strips sit down together in between the 2 bars in the Goth chassis that are just over the soundboard, and this strip actually sits just over the soundboard, just over the USB port, and that's how it rests. So that's what you're getting ready to see in the video, but here's how I made the 2020 strips you're going to see in the install video. And I'm going to set these aside because we'll need them later in the video. The scene here, and we're going to go ahead and unscrew the rear of the hilt to get to our chassis. I've already pre-wired the chassis. It's all ready to rock and roll. So all our wires are roughed in here. We're ready to go. And it's just a matter of, let's get the Proffieboard in there. Now, before I get rolling on that, This is how I do my, this is my wiring diagram. So everybody can see this is like the blade defines in the bottom of my config file. So I know that my main blade, which is here, I know it's on blade power pin 2 and 3, which we already know that, and it's on blade pin, which is data 1. My second blade, which is just a single Neopixel that's on my chamber, that's on data 2, blade 2 pin, blade power pin 1, and then my secret uh, pixel string, which I'll hook up at the end, is 15 pixels. It's going to be on data 3 on blade power pin number 4. Hey, Cam Kanama, great to see you. So we're getting ready to rock and roll here on this install. We're getting ready to roll this thing out, and I'll get you guys zoomed in so you can see, and we'll be ready to rock and roll. We'll be ready to rock and roll. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do my my typical blade pin 2 and 3 on the Proffieboard. I want to go ahead and get them set up, and I guess I could have done this beforehand, but I didn't. But I'm going to go ahead and get the blade power pins 2 and 3. Hey, Robert Myers. Good evening. We're going to get blade power pin 2 and 3 here soldered together. Now I know some people want to, will run the wire up through here, and that's fine. To each their own. I know not everybody agrees with how I jump 2 and 3 here, but it works for me. It works for me, and I like it. So we got Robert Myers and Kim Kanama on board. I'm just installing this thing. It shouldn't take too long. It's already roughed in. I did film the rest of the roughing in, which once this video publishes, I'll take, I'll copy this video off the internet, and then I probably should have zoomed you guys in for that. But anyway, I'll zoom you guys in here in a minute. But what I'm doing is I'm solidifying this. I'm doing my merge on this Proffieboard there. So basically, let me zoom you guys back out now and kind of explain to you what's going on. So I do the resistor tail thing here, and basically what we're doing is we're going to be merging the blade power pins 2 and 3 on the Proffieboard diagram. If you guys look at that, blade power pins 2 and 3 will run our main blade. So our main blade negative wire is going to these pins, and the reason that we have to bridge these or go to 2 of them is because on a Neopixel lightsaber, the main blade, I left that way too long. The main blade is actually requires a lot of amps, and what we're trying to do is divide that amp load amongst 2 MOSFETs, and I'll explain what the MOSFETs are here in a second, instead of just one, and that makes it a little bit safer, but it also makes our blade brighter that we're carrying a full amp load. So the Proffieboard has 6 MOSFETs on it, 6 MOSFETs. There's 3 on the top side and there's 3 on the bottom side. And each of those MOSFETs corresponds to an LED pad. I don't remember which one is LED 1, 2. I think this is 1, 3, and 5, and this is 2, 4, and 6 on the back, but don't quote me on that. But the bottom line is, we've got our, bridge coming up through here. I'm going to zoom you guys in so we can finish this off, and you'll be able to see that I'm going to this next one on this bridge right there. And actually, I need to cut that off a little bit. And then we will begin the install. And we will begin the install on this. Hey, Cole Weathers. Great to see you, Cole. So once I do this bridge, we're ready to be rocking and rolling. We'll start the install. And probably the first thing we're going to do is I should have put my old man glasses on. I don't even have my old man glasses on yet, y'all. So I'm going to have to put those on. I'm just going to try to get a little bit more solder here on the bridge on our back where we're going to put our main Neopixel negative wire. Yeah, we want it nice and buttered up with solder. Bobby Susan box on. Great to see you, Bobby. That light, I'm going to hit it with my soldering hand. All right, so now our Proffieboard is ready to go, and I'm going to zoom you guys out. And I'm going to bring back in the Saber to kind of show y'all where we're at. This is a clear mass Proffieboard. This is kind of a rarity. This one came from KR Sabers. I love it. It's pretty cool. And this will be the first one I've ever installed. It's the only one I own, so hopefully this goes well. Hopefully we don't butcher the install. The first things first, I'm going to get my main Neopixel negative out of this bundle of wires, which I had all tucked in because I wanted to be able to try the back of the hilt on, but I know this is my main Neopixel negative here. And there she blows. And I know that my main Neopixel negative, I know I need to go there, so we're going to rough cut this thing about right there. And I always do this solder first because I have to do this one upside down. And to me, it's a lot easier. Oh, I love the new visor. I don't have it on yet, but I'm getting ready to put it on here in a minute because I'll need it to see this stuff. And I'm going to strip some of our main Neopixel negative wire here. And get my board out of the way. Let's put some flux. Let's get some flux on that wire. And we'll come in here and tin this wire. I didn't explain too much about the chassis, and I'll do that here in a second before we wire the soundboard in. But this is a Goth 3D chassis, and you know I've got a Key Power 18650, but I've wrapped it in copper clad. I've got a 1.3 millimeter recharge port right here, and you know I've got an on-off switch here. There's actually a board cover that's going to go on once we get the board on. Go there, and got some cool stuff to show you there later. But you know, right now let's get this soundboard on here, and I'm going to try and. This is always, like, I think one of the hardest solders of the whole deal because it just is because it's upside down. But hopefully I've left enough slack here. And bend that wire. And we're going to get the Proffieboard in here. And hopefully, yep, I think that's going to work. And clean my iron. After I do this solder, I'll put the visor on and check this solder. But I'll also, I know this is going to be a big one. That helping hand just doesn't want to. So that's our main Neopixel negative soldered onto the bridge. Let me ditch my baseball hat. And, oh yeah, the hemostats are spot on. All right, I'm inspecting the solder now, and I kind of like what I see. So solder number 1 is done. We're golden there. And I just want to make sure that we can push the board back, you know, where it's going to be. All right, now, typically when I do the Proffieboard, I start on this side and work my way up. And I'm pretty sure I've got data 2 and data 3 that I'll need to run up here. So data 2, let's share. Let me get the blind man glasses off, and let's go to screen share, no peek, and let's pull up the Proffieboard diagram. We need a Proffieboard 2.2 diagram, Proffie 2.2 pin map. So I know I need data 2. That's going to be my crystal chamber, and that's the next to last pad on this far side. And my data 2 crystal chamber, I believe, was a brown wire. So I've got to find it. Purple is data 1. Hang on a minute, y'all. I'm sorting out all my wires. Orange. Oh, great. There it is. I got it. I was missing a wire there, and I had stowed all my wires so I could put the back of the chassis on. The back of the hilt, I'm sorry. I might have to add an extension on my main data wire. I'm going to bring you guys in here. I know you guys are all framed there. I'm going to bring you guys in. All right, now we're back. So, oh, that ain't good. How did that wire break? I guess I must have put too much tension on it. We're going to have one of them nights here, I can already tell. We're going to have to redo that. That's going to be really tight now. I don't know how tight that's going to be. My main Neopixel wire broke. That has never happened before. 22 gauge, I've never seen a 22 gauge break like that. But I was maybe putting a lot of pressure on it when I was moving things around. At any rate, we'll retin it and solder it back on our bridge. Yeah, where I broke off there, bigger than mess. You know, I may not have you in perfect frame here when I do this because this is kind of precarious because that wire got shortened up a lot shorter than I really cared for it to be. Let's see what we can do here. Okay. Now, this gray is my data 2 to my Neopixel, and you know what? It's too short. I'm going to add to it. This is bad. I'm going to have to add to my purple one too. I can already see it's too short. I cut them too short, which is pretty dumb. But this can be fixed. It's my saber. You know, this is my saber. It's not a customer saber, this is mine. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to splice this data wire so it's long enough. And put some heat shrink over it so we can get to our pad. We can't even get to our pad because Home Slice cut that wire too short. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this. I'm going to try and get y'all in there where you can see it here in a minute. But I'm underneath the board now and you're not going to be able to see a lot of this. But basically, my data 2 wire was probably just a hair too short. So I'm scabbing a little wire onto it. And now I'm going to put some heat shrink over my patch. And rock it and roll. Yeah, I really don't want to yank on these wires. They're, you know, pretty tight in the chassis. And I got some heat shrink on that data 2 wire, and you'll see me, I'm going to wire this data 2 wire here in just a second. If y'all remember from the Proffieboard diagram, this one's got to go to the next to last pin up here, and that's where we're getting ready to go. Oh man, my hot air isn't hot. I don't know why that is. My hot air station's not heating up. So we're gonna have to go to the old style of hit this shrink wrap here on the iron, on the clean part of the iron, to shrink up our shrinkaroo wrap, which is what I did. All right. I don't know why that's not coming to temperature, but it is what it is. So my hot air station has gone FUBAR tonight. Right now, that's, you know, not what we need. I'm getting ready to bring you guys in frame because now we're going to take this data 2. You know, our Proffieboard's going to go about right there. I know our data 2 needs to come up there, right about right there. And, you know, I did cut that wire about 6 millimeters too short, which really sucks. I don't know what I was thinking when I cut that wire, but, you know, whatever. We scabbed a little piece onto it, and now we're going to tin it. And pre-tin my iron, get a little bit of solder on my iron. Pre-tin that wire. We're going to hemostat grab it. We're going to come up through that data 2 line. Jeff Birch bend it over and bring you guys in. And try to move everything around where you can see it maybe. Zooming you guys in. There we go. Oh man. I see Benji got here. I wish I could hear you guys. You know, I'm neck deep in this, and I made a couple mistakes, and that cost me some time, but you know, other than that, we're ready to rock and roll. Now, the next wires I need to wire are going to be my speakers, which are going to go here and here. Which, let me zoom you guys out because you guys are like way zoomed in there. You guys are seeing the entirety of the universe there. So my speaker wires are going to go here and here. So I got to pull them out of the chassis. There, these orange wires. Normally I make my speaker wires blue, but I was out of 30 gauge blue PTFE, so I had to use orange. So Proffieboard is going to go about there. Speaker wires need to be about yay long. Cut them a little bit longer than expected to give us a little bit of leeway. And let's go ahead and strip these two speaker wires. Hey, my speaker wires match the Proffieboard, huh? Try and catch up on chat. I definitely like the new visor. It's good to see you, Benji. Solo Sabers. You know, the funny thing is Jeremy made his, he made his Starkiller and he's already sold it. I saw it today where he sold it and I'm like, oh my God, man, that was quick. He installed that thing and had it for like a couple of hours and then sold it. You know, I definitely want to make a Starkiller, and I get it that it's about the, the chase. I totally get it. And I definitely want to make a Starkiller out of my 2.0s, but at least one of my 2.0 kits. So I showed you guys I've got that. I'll get you guys zoomed in here. I'm soldering the speaker pads on. You guys in here, you'll see where I'm at in a minute. I'm right here. And I'm going to go ahead and get some flux on the subject here. But yeah, Jeremy already sold that saber. That saber was awesome. And it's already out the door. It was like, I'm trying to birch method that one. The other one I'm not going to be able to because there's too much solder in it when I pretend it. There's that one. And there's that one. And then I can trim that stuff that's sticking out there and trim the stuff that's sticking out here. Let's zoom you guys back out. Okay, next. See, power pin 1 and 4. So I think my next wire is going to be my auxiliary switch because I'm not using 5 or 6. So next wire is going to be my auxiliary switch, which is always my yellow wire. For those of y'all that watch my installs, you know I always make my auxiliaries yellow. So we'll cut our auxiliary wire about right there to leave us some slack. And strip it and goop it. Y'all remember watching Shameen's videos when he was making up all those sayings about strip it, tin it, bloop it, all that other crap? Then he would be singing. He was so crazy, man. I always smile every time I watch Shameen's videos. I hate that Shameen took his all his videos down off of YouTube. He was really funny. I don't know whether it was, some of the mess, that Jordan Mall was in or what, but I don't think anybody ever blamed Shameen for any of that. Shameen could have been in trouble with the IRS or something. Yeah, I saw that flagship that Jeremy just etched for you, Cole. That's looking pretty sweet, man. You gotta love that flag. You gotta love those flagships, man. They're just very cool sabers. All right, so there's our auxiliary switch. I'm gonna trim that little spare little nub there. Now, my crystal chamber goes to blade power pin 1, so I don't need that yet. We've already wired blade power pins 2 and 3. Blade power pin 4 is going to be the secret, so I'm not going to mess with that yet. So it looks like the next thing we're going to need is our main switch, which is our green wire. So we're actually progressing around the hilt. We're going to turn the hilt around, try to get it back in the frame here with you guys. I had to spin it around for me. I try to make sure that, you know, I'm this way, and I try to make sure that I'm not putting the soldering iron over the board. So I'm always trying to work the board where I don't have to go over it with the soldering iron. So I'm actually trying to go, you know, under the board with the soldering iron and stuff. And right now I need to go and grab some wires and pull them my way here. Y'all hang on. Because now is when, you know, the cram food begins. You have to make sure that your wires are routed where you want them. This is my common ground for my switches. And then now I've got to pull my main switch around from my main Neopixel negative and, you know, get it where I need it. So I'm basically, you know, my main switch is going to go about right there. We're going to cut it and leave enough slack to move around, but not too much that we can't cram through it. I have to redo my first MHS build, the makeup, because the igniter died on it, and it actually didn't break my heart that the igniter died, and especially now with 2020 pixels. See, I always like the shine through I got on that thing on the igniter. You know, where I did the 0603 LEDs on the igniter, and I got that to shine through the hilt, and I was always not wanting to give that up. But now with 2020 pixels and with all the tricks that Kim Kanama has shown me, I can kind of achieve the same effect and maybe better under the hood there. So, you know, I'm kind of not that worried about it. All right, so this is my main switch, my green wire. Bada bang. Main switch is on. Now, I need my negative for my Neopixel crystal chamber, which I saw it, and it is going over here to blade power pin 1. And it's this little black wire right here. Oh, come on, baby. Little black wire right here. I'll zoom you guys in here in a second. I guess I'm going to have to strip this sucker. And that white wire is going to be in the way, aren't you? This is the negative to my crystal chamber Neopixel that's, you know, going to be driving my crystal chamber. And a little bit of fluxer action on there. And off we go. And y'all, give me a second. Once I tin this wire, I'll bring you guys in. I'll zoom you guys in so you can see. I really hate it that I couldn't do this on Jeremy's live. Works in the way. Matter of fact, you know, I was on call for work this week, and right before my live stream, there was some crap going on at work, and I thought I was going to have to go in, and I was like, doesn't that just figure? And it resolved, thank God. I'm going to zoom you guys in and move you over, and I have to bring there. It's all confusing because it's reversed in the camera from where I'm looking at. We're actually working on that one right there. This is the LED one, and this is the negative to my chamber Neopixel. You can see my shaky hands. And I never cut the wire sticking out there. All right, so that brings us to our main battery negative. which is going to go here. And our main battery negative is this white wire right here, which comes off my recharge port. So if y'all give me a second, I have to pull that wire out of there where I can access it. Probably ought to pull that red wire out of there too while we're at it, because we're going to need it here in a second. Y'all just bear with me. I got to pull these wires out. Red. I need it here in a second. And then if I can get my forceps on that white wire, if you don't want to cooperate. Oh, I got it. Got it. All right. So next is our main battery negative. And I want to get our common switch ground out of the way here because it's kind of in my way. Our main battery negative, you know, when the Proffieboard is about right there, we're going to need about yay long. This is 22 gauge, so you really don't want to leave too much spare on the 22 gauge because that makes cram foo all the more harder. And I'm going to strip this 22 gauge PTFE wire there. And hey, Smuggler's Outpost, I don't know if that's Sotomayor or if it's Albert Flores, but hello to whoever's on there. I talked to Sotomayor here a little bit ago because I need some switches and glass eyes from Sotomayor. His stuff is, you know, pretty awesome. By the way, guys, I've determined that I don't like the KR dual switches. I just don't like them. I like the ones that Sotomayor did a lot better. All right, let's get some flux on our main battery negative. Oh, it's Albert. Main battery negative. Hey, Albert, I don't know if you know this, but you know, a bunch of years ago, you had a old MR. It was like a skinny flex, and it was a project that you didn't want. I bought it from you, and I think that was kind of before Smuggler's Outpost really took off a lot. You said it was a project that you really just didn't want to mess with, and I'm like, oh, I will. And you know, I actually turned that into a really cool saber. I don't know if I ever told you about that, but I did turn that Skinny Flex MR into a really, really cool saber. It was Neopixel, and it actually went to a Disney Anakin at Walt Disney World. How cool is that? And I've also got Quillians on a Disney World Kylo. Now this is my common switch ground, y'all. This is my white ground that's common to both of my switches in the switch control box up there on top of the saber. Move closer to the mic, Brian. Sorry. Yeah, I can't. The mic's like way away from where I'm at. We talked about that, Brian. I've got to work on getting a better mic system. I definitely got the camera worked out where you guys are getting ready to get on here. So what's going on here now is this is my main switch ground, which is common ground to both of my switches, and it's going right there. Switches, bitches. And little flux action. Mundo Cabrera, what's up? Yeah, I know. I gotta yell. I gotta remember to yell. I'm glad Brian said something. You know, someday I'll have a more professional mic or whatever, right? I mean, my camera zoom in's pretty good. But you know, the rest of it not so much. I might have to extend my main data. So I'm looking at that. Yeah, it's a little short. I'm gonna have to extend my main data. Am I going to be able to do that? Yeah. All right. Let's get my positive wire on here. This is 26 gauge pigtail going to my positive on my Proffieboard. I mean, technically we could, put an SD in it and turn it on here in a second, but I'm going to have to make my main blade data line a little bit longer. Same thing I had to do on my chamber data line because I apparently cut those too short. I was trying to cut them down short so I could tuck everything in so I could test fit the hilt because this chassis is like way too tight inside this hilt. And, I don't know what's going on with my hot air station, but it's not heating up. I have to take this damn wiring harness apart and find out what's up with it. That sucks. My hot air station's not heating up anymore. Oh man, might be time for a new soldering iron. Might be time for a new soldering station. Which that stinks, this one's been a good one. She's been a good one. My last one was Radio Shack. Alright, so now I got my positive up through there. I'm going to try and get y'all in where you can see this. And zoom you in a little bit where you can see what I'm doing. You see where I'm going to put this flux at? That's right where my positive is at. Fluxer. Oh yeah, this Proffie's sick. Sick Benji. This was a limited one from KR Sabers, like Halloween from before the pandemic. And I bought one. I'm like, oh man, that thing is the bomb.com. Look at that. And, I definitely bought one from Cal. Yeah, my damn Neopixel negative wire. My Neopixel data wire for a main blade is way too short. It's not going to reach. It's about 6 millimeters too short. So, I'm going to scab on some additional wire there. There we go. And twist and 10. I got to scab on a little piece of wire here, y'all. I cut both my data lines for my main blade and my crystal chamber too short, so I'll get y'all back on here in a minute. I don't need that much. I was like just a few millimeters too short. Let me zoom you guys out. Zoom you guys out while I'm working on this because I know you guys were like zoomed way in there. Zoomies, like when anybody got a dog, do dogs get your zoomies? Like tonight when I finish this, I'm gonna go on my next walk of the day and walk risky, which I told you about my weight loss adventure because I'm fat. Because I'm fat. So I'm down 35 pounds, y'all. 35 pounds. And, I'm definitely on a mission to lose that weight. Yep. I did pre-program it. Man, I did all that stuff, Jeremy. I was ready to rock and roll the other night. And, when the work thing happened, I was just like, are you freaking kidding me? Because I've been busting my butt like all before Thanksgiving to make sure that this thing was ready to rock and roll for your stream. Because, I wanted to be able to get it fired up, in about 35, 40 minutes. And I got to do the old school shrinkaroo with my soldering iron because something's wrong with my heat gun. I don't even know what it is. All right, so data 1 on Proffieboard V2 is right there. I know because, you know, I've wired a lot of them. You know, they don't even need labels, right? I'm sure Jeremy's the same way. If you guys want to check, we can go check. So, you know, screen captured, no peak. Let's go look at the diagram. You can see that data 1 is 1, 2, 3 up from the bottom on the left, which is where we're getting ready to rock and roll on this. So this is the last wire of the not secret stuff. Now where's my stream? Oh, found my stream. I lost you guys for a minute there. Here we go. All right, we're back on the scene. And let me get this main data line strip. This is the last wire of the main wires in the Saber that we got to wire. And then there's another secret squirrel thing I'm going to bring in here and show you in just a second. And yeah, by the way, guys, I do have a Prism 5.1 test board. And, you know, it comes in handy for things like I'm getting ready to show you next, because when I first wired this thing up, it was kind of squirrely on the test rig. And then, you know, when I tested it the second time on the test rig, I had much success. And, you know, hopefully that way, by the time we wire what's coming next into the Saber, it's going to work too. And, you know, which is going to be pretty awesome. Also, I had to leave the speaker out of this one because I got to run in the the board supports after I get this all soldered down. Probably not gonna be able to put the covers and all that on it tonight on this stream, but should be able to see it fire up so you can kind of get a preview of what's going to be happening. Oh man, you guys were off screen. Sorry. I'm actually below the camera there. All right. So technically now the Proffieboard will fire up. Well, I got a surprise. Bam! So I got a strip of 2020s, and this is 15 2020s wired in parallel, and I want them to go, you know, over the soundboard like this. And I've got to wire this to my Neopixel negatives. Got to go to power pin 4 and data 3 and positive. So power pin 4 is here. So I'm going to put my Neopixel strips about where they're going to be. And I know I want to leave a little slack. So that needs to go to blade power pin 4. I'm going to leave a little bit more slack. And let's go ahead and get that stripped. Oh yeah, so this is 30 Neopixels that are going to be sitting on top of the board. This is going to be awesome. I actually did similar to this on my other Starkiller builds, but I used 3535s, and I think I was only able to get 2 or 3 in there. You know, with 2020s, you can jam a lot more in there. It's crazy. All right, so this is going to blade power pin 4. The Neopixel negative line from this is going to blade power pin 4. I'm going to leave y'all zoomed out here, and hopefully you know, get all this done. So blade power pin 4 is going to be really hard for me to get to, or not. There's blade power pin 4. Put a little bit of flux on the subject. And then we got to go to the thing and find data 3 because I don't remember data 3 because I just don't use data 3 a lot. And then we're also going to have to find somewhere for the positive wire to go on the board. So I'm probably going to send it to a 3.3 volt pad. Let's go to screen share real quick. And let's go to Proffieboard. So I think data 3 is So it's speaker, speaker, button 3, data 3. So speaker, speaker, skip 1, data 3. And then I think I'm going to go to the 3.3 volt pad. So just up from data 1 with my positive. And I think I'm going to do both of those on top of the Proffieboard to make life simpler. I think I'm going to do that. If you ever need accent pixel strips, I carry 20/20 thin and flexible strips. Oh yeah, I know. So I've got rolls of 20/20 strips, and they can't fit anywhere. They're just awesome. And me and Kim Kanama and I are actually, Kim does a lot more than me, but I'm actually making like 15/15 accents and 15/15 PCBs. All right, so my positive wire I'm going to put to right here above my data 1. So let me cut this one to length. And this is my 3.3 volt pad, and it'll be enough to power the pixels, you know. I'm going to leave a little bit of slack. And we're going to go ahead and, yeah, I suppose I could wire it to the 5 volt. I think these are 5 volt LEDs, but I'm just going to wire it to the 3 volt. It'll be fine. It'll be just fine. And I think I'm going to go over the Proffieboard on this one. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin the pad, and I'm going to do it old school and solder on top of the Proffieboard. So I'm going to go ahead and pre-tin the pad. I'm going to pre-tin my wire. And I'm going to pre-tin this pad. And I'm going to cut a little bit off this wire. I'm going to lower my old man vision down for this one. And my old man vision's hitting the damn camera. All right, so there's my positive on the 3.3 volt pad. And then I'm going to turn the saber around, and then we're going to go speaker, speaker, data. So let me bring my data line over here. After I solder this wire on, we'll be ready to throw the SD card in here and rock and roll. Now, I'm not going to solidify the rest of the install tonight, but you'll be able to see kind of what we got going on. So remember, I went speaker, 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 skip 1, data. So if I need this to go there, we'll cut it about right there. We're going to put this on top of the Proffieboard as well. I'm not going to go underneath. That way, you know, if I need to remove this strip at a later date, you know, I can just take the strip out and, you know, work on the Proffieboard or add components or whatever without having to get in underneath. Okay, so there's that. Now we got to strip our final data wire. This is the last wire, y'all. Last wire of the install. And I know it looks a little bit crazy, but I have a plan to neaten all this up. And then I'll try and look at the chat here a little bit too. All right. Let's solder this, tin this wire. I'm going to cut it because I don't want it quite that long. And old man glasses, engage. Of course, the Neopixel strip's going to get in the way too, right? It's getting in the way of my eyes, so I'm going to have to do something with that. All right, let's try this again. Oh, shaky hands. I don't particularly like that solder, but it's going to work for demonstration purposes. Okay. So we need an SD card. We need an SD card. And oh, where's my box? SD card. Got it. Watch it say font directory not found, SD card not found. All right. Okay. She's all installed. This is my main switch. There's not anything in the recharge port. Let's throw the main switch to her. Oh, baby. Look at those 30 Neopixels. That's going to be sick. Let's turn this thing on. Oh, crystal chamber. We've got a fail going in the crystal chamber. My pixel's not really lighting up the crystal chamber that good. I mean, it's a little bit, but not much. But my connector is doing good. So I'm going to have to disconnect it and find out what's going on with my crystal chamber. Oh, this is a magnetic stand. I've been watching Albert and all the magnetic stuff he uses, and I'm converting everything to magnetics. But at any rate, whoa! Oh, my motion gestures work. But at any rate, you guys can see that the 30 pixel strand there. Look at there. Look at that pattern. It's just bad these days. Huh. If y'all don't think that's bright. Let's test the music. Oop. Well, so I got to take it apart and find out why my crystal chamber is not lighting up. It's a good thing I didn't glue all that in. I might end up having to replace that Neopixel in the crystal chamber. Although it's lit up in there, it's just not shining on the crystal. I can see it lit up inside of there. Oh, you know what? It came unglued. My Neopixel came unglued in there. So that should be an easy fix. But I'm not going to do it tonight. That's enough for tonight. Did I show you guys the thing working? You can see my I got a stock connector in there. It's working. I'll get the crystal working, and probably do another live video later tonight. But so basically, what's going to happen is this Neopixel strip will be there, and then this cover, once I get everything down, will be like there. So it's going to look more like that, which that's giving you a better preview of what's coming. So then let's look at the different effects. There's your different effects on the 2020s. It's just bad these days. That's a blue flash, but it's crazy. And then there's, like a normal Cylon or whatever. And there's a going from center out. See, I could do subblades there and do the ends white, like kind of like you saw on the Starkiller that Jeremy did. But anyway, let me get the camera moved. Y'all stand by. I'm going to put you back in. I'm going to put you back in screen capture for a second while I move cameras. Y'all just bear with me for 1 second. Let me get this camera moved, and I'll show you this thing in totality. time for me to go off risky. But let's get this up there. Let's get back to you guys. Aha! All right. I think the camera lens had some goop on it or something. But at any rate, there you can see that is insane. Those 2020 Neopixels. Once I get all this solidified and down in there, and once I get the board cover on and get the saber solidified down in there. Of course, you know my motion gestures work. Smuggler's Outpost 20mm bass speaker, Proffieboard, clear mass, 2020 accent strips. We get the crystal chamber working. It does have a shock adapter. And this is my preset where, it's a demo preset, so I wanted all the blinkies going, including the emitter. So I got the emitter flashing on and off too on the second preset, the second Starkiller preset. Man, that Neopixel is working in there in the crystal chamber. It just came unglued. It's actually shining inside of there. So I'll get that fixed and we'll get that shining back on my crystal like it's supposed to be. But that's a pretty cool saber. That's gonna be awesome. You guys see I went with the digitized 1 years. It's still got the heat stained emitter. I did a lot of wear and tear even on the buttons. Like you can see that button. And I did a lot of wear and tear on the midsection, including some rust, and that's real rust. And I showed how I got that at the beginning of the video tonight. And I wanted to show you guys the back of the hilt. Hang on a minute, stupid motion gestures. Here's the back of the hilt, and you can see, it's kind of shiny. But I did wear even on the grips, like on the outside section of the grips, where you'd be holding it. And then I left the patina, the copper patina and the rust in these sections, where your hand doesn't touch it. So it's worn where your hand grabs it, and it's also worn on the saber clip, where this thing's going in and out of the saber clip, which I have one there somewhere. I have a saber clip here. You put the saber clip on your belt, and you drop your saber in, and off you go. But where you're using the saber clip, you would have some wear and tear. So I even did wear and tear on that. I did wear and tear on the pommel. This thing is going to look pretty sick. I think it's pretty awesome. What do you guys think? I did a lot of work on this saber. I will do another video to show you all the finished product. But I mean, you guys can see how awesome that 2020 strip is. I mean, look how bright that thing is. That is just going to be sick. So, yeah, I love this Starkiller. It was a lot of fun, and I'm glad I finally got to use my orange Proffieboard, and we got this Starkiller working. I'll do another video with it working. I'm sorry about the prom stunt. I cut two of my data wires too short, had to scat onto them, but hey, it's a personal build, but this thing's going to be awesome. And yeah, I also used Casey's aluminum black on this thing. So I'll show you guys the kit again that I use. Of course, Casey's aluminum black. I use that on the hilt. And then I use this accent. It's rust, and I got this from the Hobby Lobby. This came from Hobby Lobby. And it's a 3-stage kit. You basically have primer. And then you have this iron paint, which has iron in it. And then you have the activator, this stuff, which you spray on the iron paint, and then the iron paint actually rusts. It's a way to get real iron oxide on aluminum. So it's pretty cool. Yep. That's what I'm doing, Brian. I tried to make it like we weather stuff in the 501st Legion. That's how I tried to make it. And I love this thing, man. It's going to be awesome. When this saber's done, I need to send it to Benji for glam shots because I suck as a photographer. But I can already tell you that the shots that I've shown of this saber don't do it any justice because in person the thing is just outstanding. Wow, you made it. You're still here. This is the completed saber, and I'm in my demo preset on this thing now, and I'll show you that demo preset. So here's our 2020 LEDs under the finished lid. You can see those 2020 LEDs going. Here's our finished 1.3 millimeter recharge port. You can see you can't see all that crap that was on it when I installed it. There's our kill switch. Now the cool thing about my demo mode is you see the crystal chamber going, which when I first did the install it wasn't. I had to fix the Neopixel, came unstowed, but now the Neopixel is back in there. And in my demo mode, you also have the main blade flashing on and off, so you should see the main blade flashing on and off here in the blade plug, and you do. And this is lit by a stock connector. And now let's put this thing on here and kind of show you this saber in action. Now this thing is loud. So here's our Starkiller saber. Let's go to the first preset.
Vader's Assassin.
Vader's Assassin by Proffieboard. You can see that our crystal is pulsing off and on and idle. Let's go to the main theme, the music. Starkiller's theme. She's awesome. Gesture ignitions. So now that you've seen the gestures, you know this saber functions just like most of my other sabers. You know, when you're in battle mode, you got melt. As you twist the saber, the color changes. When you pull away, it stops. You know, when you hit other saber blades, you're in automatic lockup. Pulling away stops it. And then you also have tip drag. By pointing the saber down. It's hard for me to bring it back up without shutting it off. So I'm going to go really slow. But there's tip drag. And it just stops when you pull the saber away. So that's battle mode. So the saber does that. That's pretty cool.
Vader's Assassin.
Next preset is my demo preset, which you see the whole blade fading off and on, and it's in time with the crystal chamber. That's just my display preset. The blade won't be in it when it's on display.
Kylo Ren.
Kylo Ren, Crossguard, K-Sith, Classic, Fireblade. Kyberphonics Fire, which is, you know, the real Fireblade by FET 263 that, you know, dissipates when you're turning it down, and then as you tilt the saber back up, the fire moves back toward the tip. There's lightning block on that Fireblade.
It's just Ben these days.
And then this is Kyberphonics Ben. And there you can see a blue blade coming out of, you know, our Starkiller Hilt. But that's all I programmed on it for right now. But you know, that thing is awesome. And thank you guys for coming along for the ride. And you know, you got to see this hilt getting installed. And you know, I'll show you the Neopixel accents and the 2020s on the back of it here real quick, so you guys can see them in action. This is the same saber that we've been demoing here, so you know, I'll try to do this totally uncut so you guys can see it. The bin is just flashing blue on those Neopixels, and then we'll go to the first preset, Vader's Assassin by Proffieboard, and you see it's just a Cylon back and forth. And then let's go to the next preset, which this is my, you know, this is my preset for the shelf. And you see that scrolling back and forth. And I might need to put another layer of paint on there because it's showing through the plastic, but you know, whatever. Still looks awesome.
Kylo Ren.
There's going center out, center out, center out on the crossguard. Still center out on fire.
It's just Ben.
And then blue flashing on Ben. So that's all I programmed. Now I could do a lot more. Let me turn this saber off. And you see our switch works. It's just incredible. This was an incredible lightsaber, an incredible project. It was inspired massively by Benji Graham at Nerf Herders Custom Sabers, as well as Jeremy from Solo Sabers. You know, they both inspired me massively to knock this out. And, you know, I'm pretty proud. She's in my collection now. And, You know, now I can get to building everyone else's stuff again. But it's every now and then, you know, Benji said it. You know, every now and then it's kind of nice to build yourself a saber, to keep your, you know, energy level up and passion up. You know, sometimes you get so busy building stuff for everyone else that you forget, you know, how cool these things are. But there you go. That's the completed saber. I might have some minor touch-ups like painting the wires and, you know, painting some of the passages so it's a little bit more doable. But hey, thank you guys for coming along for the ride. And I hope this video helps somebody build your own saber. And remember, if I can do it, you can do it. Hashtag nerd up. May the force be with you. Or the dark side, as it were. Blam! Thank you everybody for watching, as usual. I really appreciate y'all tuning in on my channel. And as always,